Hello, Jeff here. It has been ages since I did a just general kind of live stream. So I was just feeling like I should pop on today and have a quick chit chat. So, as I am fond of saying when I do these live streams, this is your live event. I am simply a facilitator. The chat is open. I am here to answer questions. I used to call this office hours, thinking about my days back at university where, the TA or whatever would have like their office, which was usually mostly a glorified broom closet. At least that's what ours looked like. And people generally didn't show up, but if they did, you were then expected to answer questions, which I was always very keen to do. So anyway, I don't have an agenda. I'm just chilling, just hanging out, but I'm here to answer your questions. So I'll sort of hang around for a little while, and if people pop into the chat, then let me know what's going on, and I will gladly answer questions. Here we are. I love losing your tenor warm-up. Sorry. Bruce, thank you for that, Bruce. I appreciate that. I realize I have already created an issue for myself because I got this whole thing going and I forgot to get water. I don't think I have any water here, but actually I might have a little bit. One second here. Yeah. Oh, this is not much. That is not much, but it's better than nothing. So Bruce, thank you for that. Thanks for popping in. I really appreciate that. Way to kick off the chat today. Oh, there's got a few other people have popped in. I've got the. Forgive me, by the way. I'm going to try to remember to address you, but the questions will come up over here, and so I'm going to end up probably doing this quite a lot while we hang out here. And hopefully answer some cool questions. Which, by the way, all questions are cool. So just fire away. Let's hear what's going on. Excuse me while I have a quick sip. Lucia? Hi, Jeff. I use your warm-up, but sing soprano in the choir and want warm-up for soprano. Well, pick the soprano ones. They're labeled soprano, so maybe try those. But yeah, that would be my first response. But maybe tell me a bit more. Maybe I'm missing something here. Thinking about soprano. Oh, here we are. Is that? Goodness me, why did Stream Elements do that? That is so bizarre. Okay, Louis or Lois, you are a superb YouTube vocal coach. I use your baritone warm-ups. Question, how do I do the lower register of baritone vocal range? That it is very audible. Okay, cool. All right, so first of all, thank you for watching. And thanks for singing along. I really appreciate that. Problems with the high notes. Okay, so backing up here for a second. Louis, presumably you want more presence. You want to be a bit more voluminous, shall we say. So, believe it or not, the beginning to this is to be lighter and brighter. If you try to press into the low register of your voice, what you're going to end up doing is probably using a lot of extra muscle control around the larynx to depress it into a lowered position. And that will ultimately dampen your sound long term. What we need to learn to do is to allow the larynx to be flexible in the position and come to that neutral to lowered position by only using what is absolutely necessary, and we want to release all the rest of that. This is generally best done with that lighter and brighter sound as I sang it here. And then as you gain comfort with that and feel the release of it, you can start to add a bit more subglottic air pressure. This will have the action of getting the larynx to lower a little bit further, which will increase airflow over the vocal fold. That will increase resonance, increase color, and increase volume. But it starts with that lighter and brighter sound. So Lois is saying, I have problems with the high notes. So Lucia, without hearing you, I can only kind of make some guesses about what's going on. So one, if you're not familiar with registration event technique and you're not successfully getting over your primo passaggio, then that would very quickly result in the high notes being an issue. So I would focus on that. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I say getting over the registration event into this, because now, and it also depends on high. You said you're singing in a choir, the soprano parts. Those parts are, the parts that you're going to end up with are going to vary depending on the choir and the repertoire that you're covering. So, it's really hard to say where exactly in your range we're talking about here. My suspicion is it's the primo passaggio and that you're not getting into the middle voice registers, and then that's really making it difficult because a lot of choral parts, whenever you generalize, you're wrong. But a lot of the choral parts that I've seen for soprano just aren't really that high. But then, of course, there are exceptions to that, and there are many others that are, in fact, that high, and that you need to be able to not only navigate into the middle voice registers, but also over the secondo passaggio. Any one of those, like failure to successfully navigate any of those registration events, would easily cap your range for you and make it so that it's not possible for you to get to the tessitura that you need to. So, it's hard to say without knowing a lot more details, but that's my suspicion. Now, it seems as if you maybe have added a few. See if you. I do. I understand. Okay, great. So great. Thank you for popping in there. But maybe add more. It's kind of quiet right now. So feel free, elaborate a little bit more, and then I can perhaps help more. What do we have here? Greg M. saw the live note, thought I'd say hello. How about thoughts on exercises when feeling a little raw, sore throat, or maybe just subpar? Yeah, of course, Greg, happy. And thanks for popping in, I appreciate that. So your comment covers quite a lot of, there's a lot of variety in that comment. On days when I'm just kind of feeling blah, I'm just I don't feel like this, then I'm just here. I'm just chilling, And if I'm feeling creative, I'll go through the harmonies for that as well, just to kind of sing, feel nice, relax a little bit, not too taxing. If your voice is raw, then you need to ascertain, if you have, generally speaking, good registration event practices, then you need to ascertain if you're executing them effectively, or if they're feeling forced because of the soreness or rawness. And if they are either inaccessible or they're feeling forced, then you need to take the day off. It is advisable to try to avoid having that happen to your voice. If it's happening regularly, then you may want to assess your registration event technique, your arpeggio practice, things of that nature. But if you're getting sick and stuff like that, like if you got a cold, having a cold isn't necessarily like an automatic showstopper. But if the irritation to the vocal folds is such that they're not adducting well, and so you're having to force the registration event, or it's just not speaking, then it's better to take a day off. Otherwise, you're effectively just training bad habits by going in there and kind of forcing it through. Louis wants to sing the Love Boat theme in a baritone range. I haven't heard I can kind of remember it off the top of my head, but I mean, and in baritone range, like, a baritone with a good registration event, a lyric baritone or a bass baritone, that's going to change. That's going to mean different things. And I have to say, like, I don't know the Love Boat theme song well enough off the top of my head to tell you what key to put it in, but I can tell you how to learn how to sing it. Assess your range, assess your facility across registration events. Look at the notes in the melody of the song, of the theme song for the Love Boat. The notes in the key singing, like if you look at the sheet music, it'll tell you what key it's in. Look at the melody. Take a look at that melody and map it onto your accessible range, like what's your usable range, and adjust accordingly. So if, for example, again, I'm just like hypothetically here, right? Let's say in the original key, the high note in the Love Boat is F4 above middle C. So F4, right? That's the F above middle C. That one. All right? And your facility is solid to E flat 4. Well, then you would maybe change the key so that D4 is the highest note in the melody, just for starters. And see if you've got the low range to support that. If you don't, then you might have to make it so that the high note's E flat 4, or you might not be able to move it at all. And you've got to work on your registration event techniques so that the high notes are more accessible. But I don't remember that tune having like a super wide range. So my suspicion is that you'll probably be able to move it to a favorable key and then get to work on it, get to work on the melody and things like that. And as you learn that melody in this new key, you can then start to also work on your registration event technique. So if you want to, over time, you can move it back to the original key, if that's important to you. It doesn't have to be. The song, I presume, wasn't written specifically for you, nor for you as a vocalist. So why does it matter if you sing it in the original key? Really, like, we get hung up on this like original key thing. Sometimes it's a very practical matter. If I move it so that it suits my range, better, more easily, etc., then the low notes are too low for me. I can't sing them. Okay, well, then you're going to have to work on zona de passaggio practices, or perhaps even registration event practices, so that it's in a more favorable place, maybe. But if you didn't write the song and it wasn't written for you, honestly, even if you did write the song, you can then put it whatever key you want. Like if you wrote the song, put it in whatever key you want. But if it wasn't written for you, they weren't taking your range into account. And so I would say feel free to adjust as necessary. Bruce, one question I have is, does agility exercises help with faster staccato, or also with R&B type runs as well? I noticed the short breaths between notes to maintain 80% air in lungs. Where's the rest of that? Okay, so I don't see the rest of that question. That's okay. Do the agility exercises help with faster staccato? And or also with R&B type runs as well? The agility exercises are general agility practices. they are meant, what they're doing is trying to help you keep enough subglottic air pressure happening so that the vocal folds remain as released as they can, so that you can then change notes quickly and effectively. In other words, by effectively, I mean intonation is good, tone quality remains consistent, that kind of stuff. They are kind of basic exercises. So from them, you can then go on to the specific practices that you might need for the repertoire that you're singing. So if you need agility with more staccato passages, then you could incorporate some staccato practice into your agility practices. Or you could try to execute, like my videos that are doing agility practices, you could do them once as written or as filmed if you like. But then try them doing some of the notes staccato, maybe only a couple. And I've done a few rock riff videos in the past. I mean, the agility will help with any kind of riffs, quite frankly. It's going to be ear training and knowing what the riffs are from the style in question that will probably help you then execute those runs. So on the one hand, the vocal agility works across the board. Stylistically, the note choices may be different for R&B versus if you're riffing like in a more singer-songwriter context or a pop music context. Like a lot of like pop music riffs and things like that will be neighbor tones. So they'll have a melody that's just doing a sort of neighbor tone thing. Whereas in some of the R&B stuff, you get that flatted third gets worked into the riffs more frequently. And then other genres will lean more on pentatonic things. So you'll have like that kind of sound, and then their melody might end here, and then they'll riff down to that lower octave. But what they've done is used a pentatonic scale. Right? Broke, and I just started on the fifth, up to the sixth, down to the third, down to the tonic. You know, the agility works across the board. It's going to be the note choices and the scale choice selections that are going to make your riffing either like more typical in the genre that you're in, or perhaps more ear-catching if you kind of mix them up a little bit. So maybe, you know, instead of just doing like maybe you do, if you're in an R&B thing, maybe you do a bit of that pentatonic, but you work in the minor 3 on the descending fret. And this is just, I'm just like riffing myself here, right? But you work a little bit of that minor 3rd in there and sort of mix things up a little bit. That could be really cool. So yeah, the agility practices are just agility. Like that's going to always be useful. Honestly, it's just useful. It's useful for a lot of different respects, in a lot of different respects, but will certainly be useful for R&B and whatever else you're singing. It's going to be the ear training that informs you as to your note selection. Dry mouth gel. Never even heard of a dry mouth gel versus launch versus spray. Before hitting the stage, I wouldn't use any of them, quite frankly. I would focus on my technique in my weeks and months prior to getting on the stage, and my overall hydration. If you, that would be my first thing is hydration, and also dietary considerations. Like what is it you've got going on here that's contributing to the dry mouth? And now, if you must use some of this stuff, gels, lozenges, or sprays, I would use the one that was least impactful on your voice, I can't possibly tell you which one's best for you. You have to know from your own experience. But I would sooner look at the root causes to try to nip that in the bud so that you weren't reliant on these things. But, you know, I don't know that I know you personally, and so if this is a medical thing, then you might talk to your doctor about what's going on. What are the root causes of this problem? If you are a brilliant vocalist, thank you, Louis. I appreciate that. Or if it is Louis, forgive me, but Louis, thank you. I really do my best. Lucia understands. Thank you. I'm glad for that. I like you have gone live. Thank you. My pleasure. Yeah, I hadn't done this in ages. John, I recently found your channel and have been practicing. What is the main difference between ordinary singing and opera? What's the difference when practicing? So John, thank you for your kind words. I appreciate that. And your appreciation for my lessons. Thank you for that too. What is the difference between ordinary singing and opera? Well, I suppose that's a very interesting question. The technique that I teach is taken from opera technique. It's taken from bel canto singing. And there's some other disciplines that I kind of incorporate into some of my practices, which I have studied over the years or been taught by teachers over the years that left an impression on me, or I found to be particularly helpful for vocalists. And so I incorporate those as needed. We have to, I think, make a differentiation between, okay, maybe let's approach it this way. I don't really sing opera. I have over the years sung some classical pieces, and I primarily teach popular styles. But the technique that I teach is taken from opera pedagogy. So how does that all work? When we sing popular styles, we make concessions to the technique so that we remain sounding in the popular genres. So like a couple, I guess, decades ago now, there was a couple of CDs that were released, and I think it was like Pavarotti and Friends. And if you listen to them, you've got some great vocalists that all sing in the popular genre, and then you got Pavarotti singing, and you hear like that, and like the comparisons between the two. If you took my lessons and you kept on practicing those lessons and kept on working for greater and greater release, greater and greater continuity between the vowels, and just greater and greater practice of the apoggia breath management, over time, you would eventually end up sounding more classical, more operatic. But we make concessions for the vowels in our singing so that we remain in the popular genres. I hope that, I'm not sure if that makes sense or not. But, so what's the difference between ordinary singing and opera? We're certainly working towards aligning our vowels so that we get good legato connected phrases. But we may not modify them quite so much as we get into the zona di passaggio and beyond, so that we remain somewhat more intelligible, able to be understood. You know, one of the genres that I am privileged to work with very frequently are musical theater vocalists. And I think they have some of the hardest jobs in the singing biz, because they both have to phonate or sing at an incredibly high level, but they also have to be understood because they're delivering the narrative. And so they don't get as much flexibility in terms of modifications of vowels and the diminishing of consonants so that the phrases are connected. And particularly in the higher tessitura, this is of great advantage. There's a quote that I lean on all the time, and I read it in a book decades ago, but it left such an impression on me, but I've forgotten the vocalist. Basically, they were a very well-known opera vocalist. And basically what they said is that they don't care at all what the libretto is, and libretto is the lyrics in opera. They don't care at all what the vowels are in the libretto. Like, they will change them to whatever they need in order to be able to phonate effectively, to sing effectively. This, of course, undermines intelligibility entirely. And I need to like source that so I can quote it more effectively and cite it appropriately. But if you think about that, that generates an awful lot of freedom, but it prioritizes the phonation, the sound and intonation over everything else. And that's great. And if you're singing a vocalise, which has no consonants, it's just vowel sounds, then you don't have to worry about that at all. But for the rest of us, if we're singing songs, if we're a singer-songwriter, generally speaking, we want to more or less be understood. And so we can only make these modifications to a certain extent. Now, if you're writing your own music and you've written a particularly challenging part and you're like they can read the lyrics online, I'm more interested in the sound and the qualities and the textures that I'm creating vocally. Go for it. Honestly, even if you're covering a tune, but you're covering it in your own way, go for it. I see no issues there. But if you still want to be understood, then you're going to make some concessions, which may mean not modifying vowels quite as much, and it might mean introducing more consonants into the lines than would, strictly speaking, be advantageous, particularly if you're singing at a high tessitura in a high range. So I don't know. I hope that helps. Let's keep going. Lucia, how many times a week do you recommend to practice? I am practicing an hour every day. That's great. That's what I recommend. Now, an hour is a very nice amount. Hopefully you're splitting that up like 15, 20 minutes vocalization and then the rest on repertoire. That's how I would break that up if I were you. But I mean, if you're working specifically on some technical things that need more time, that's cool too. When I was working out my like secondo passaggio registration event practice, I definitely spent more of my hour on technique than I do now, but yeah, every day is awesome. Bruce, does arpeggio breathing translate to all styles of singing? I think so, yes. I remember you preferring it over okay, they're not separate things, but diaphragmatic breathing is often that's like the whole usually that's the stick your stomach out and suck it back in. That's not diaphragmatic breathing. It gets talked about that way, but when you're doing that, when you're sticking your stomach out, you are primarily moving viscera. You're not really moving the diaphragm that much. The diaphragm is a transverse muscle connecting from across the torso. And in an arpeggio practice, when you do your lateral expansion, you're drawing the diaphragm down, and then it's interacting with your core body muscles when you create support, when you create subglottic air pressure and begin to sing. Arpeggio is diaphragmatic breathing. It just doesn't get talked about that way. And diaphragmatic breathing, ironically enough, mostly, it isn't. I'm sorry to have to say. I know that that's not a popular opinion, but usually what I say at this point is don't take my word for it. Do your own research. But don't necessarily just do it online. Have a look at a few textbooks. See what, or go and like look at the Oxford Handbook of Singing. That's a fairly new a release. I don't know if the library would have it necessarily, and it's quite a tome, but that might be a resource to check out. Look at some of Richard Miller's works, or Shirley Emmons and her works. Unfortunately, they finally took down the webpage. It was a beautiful one-page synopsis on Apogeo practice, and they recently took it down. I should have had a screen capture of it, but take another look. Come back the next time I'm on a live event. We can talk more about it. But yeah, Jared, my natural range sits around the classic baritone tenor overlap. I can sing most of Frank Sinatra's and Engelbert Humperdinck's material without strain. Even their higher phrases feel natural and full. Wonderful. Well, I'm glad to hear it. With singers like Sam Smith or other pop tenors who rely on extended mix and falsetto, I can reach the notes, but my tone thins out, and my falsetto still needs polish and control. Cool. I mean, keep on working on your registration event practice, and you'll be able to adjust that more effectively. My advice would be working towards voce piena in testa, and then subtle alterations to maybe sound more like a Sam Smith become easier to do. Angelus Carter says, "Hey Jeff, hello, welcome." I think we've been on for, I don't know, half an hour or so, something like that. Probably gonna wrap it up here in a minute. I just wanted to pop on for a little while here. Do you have any advice on tenors who want to belt higher notes? Depends on what we're talking about here. My advice is I really don't advocate belting more than a minor third above your secondo passaggio. So that means that if you have F as a secondo passaggio, then A flat would be the self-imposed limit that I would suggest. My advice is always to work more on voce piena in testa, and that then really creates an opportunity to have a full-sounding voice, C5, D flat 5, D5. There's very little material, I think, that exceeds that by much of a margin. So yeah, that's my advice. Even if you said well, I don't want to stick to that minor third rule, that's an arbitrary rule that you've created, which is true, then I would still say that developing good registration events and voce piena in testa is going to inform how you might belt in the future. So yes, I used to smoke and it affected my voice. Plus smoking. I'm glad, you said you used to smoke, so hopefully you've quit, which is awesome. So congratulations. I know that that's really difficult, and I'm glad to hear you've done that. Depending on how long it's been since you quit, that you might still be kind of in the aftermath of that. I don't know. So yeah, my advice to you, voce piena in testa, and then whether or not you want to stick to my minor third guidance, you'll at least then have a better picture of what your voice is going to feel like at the higher notes that and I'm not sure exactly how you're talking about. So yeah, that's the thing. John, what way can I measure if I'm getting better? To record myself? Probably in-person lessons. I mean, yeah, sure, in-person lessons are great. But I think I would put the recordings ahead of that, quite frankly. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, in order for you to truly get better and to continue to get better, you have to be able to hear the same kinds of things that the teacher in question is hearing. That's how you're going to progress. And so here's one of the things, here's one thing that could be really, really helpful, is if you did go for a lesson, record it, And then when they say, oh, this is what happened here, try it like this, then learn, like listen back and listen and see if you can hear what they're talking about. Come to an understanding of why they made that comment. And then when you do your recordings at home, you can then listen for that same thing too. You know, it's like the recording oneself is useful if you are then listening to it and trying to understand what's happening. So in like, you know, in examples like this, I mean, it's pretty easy to hear what's wrong with that, right? Like ah didn't align at all with A. Then you have to learn how to get it to align. And that's where, if I may be so bold, like channels like my YouTube channel are helpful because I've got videos on how to align your ah vowel, and you can go there and do the practices and see what that feels like and how it sounds different, and then go back to your song or your practice that you were doing before that had the issue and see if it's gotten any better, or maybe you have to come back and do more practice, etc., so on and so forth. So yeah, that's, you know, recording is great, but it's the analysis that's going to then help you progress. Somebody said something about singing the blues. Where was that? Any suggestions for singing blues? I mean, if your technique is in place, then, you know, listen to the people that you like and listen for their elements of style. What kinds of riffs? How are they adding on to phrases? How are they making connections between pitches? What are the elements of style that make them sound good? And then see if you can incorporate them into the songs that you're singing. Have a listen. See what you like. Keep those things. Discard what you don't. Maybe get a bit more input from a different blues artist or just a different era from a blues artist that you like. Wash, rinse, repeat. Like that's how, you know, that's one of the ways that we become our own individual voices, our own individual musicians, are incorporating elements of style that we hear from this person or that person, but then discarding some and keeping others and so on and so forth. Someone said something about like they used to be able to sing soprano notes. I mean, you know, there's an awful lot of overlap in even baritone and soprano voices. For example, you know, a soprano vocalist, you know, middle C, even B flats, you know, and baritones can sing up to G's if they've got a good registration event practice. I mean, this is not quite an octave of overlap, but I mean, if we're talking a mezzo soprano, now we've got an octave of overlap. And this is still like thinking about a baritone with a good registration event practice. You know, if you're a tenor with a good registration event practice, then you might have, you know, I mean, like your overall range would be somewhere in this realm, but now we're talking about like, you know, more than an octave of overlap with the soprano range vocalist. And a tenor with a bit more extension might even, you know, go a bit further. We do well to remember that these ranges they're not like exclusive. It's not like the sopranos sing over here and then the baritones are over here and the tenors are there. And there's like all kinds of overlap for each of the Fox. Yes, some more than others. But there's still plenty of overlap. I don't doubt that you're singing notes that sopranos sing right now. That wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. My pleasure, John. And thanks so much. Oh, thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Oh, I really appreciate all of that. I hope that you've had a lovely day. It seems like we've come to a natural kind of close here, and quite frankly, I'm starving. It's time for dinner for me, so I am going to bid you a fond farewell. Thank you as always for being a part of this. Thank you for being here on the channel. Great to get a chance to interact a little bit with you. Have a wonderful day. I'm going to try and do this more frequently. So thanks, and until next time, take really good care of your voices. Enjoy singing. See you again. Bye.